For decades, the Franco regime refused to allow this painting to be shown in Spain, desperate to silence its message. The painting's defiance was so direct that when a Gestapo officer once asked Picasso if he had created the work, the artist famously replied, "No, you did." In today's video, we'll analyze how Picasso created a work of such devastating political and emotional power, and explore the central debate that still surrounds its most famous figures. The Spanish Republican government commissioned this work for the Spanish Pavilion at the 1937 Paris International Exposition. The painting directly depicts the aftermath of the bombing of Guernica, a small Basque town devastated by German and Italian warplanes on April 26, 1937. This wasn't just art. It was an immediate, powerful protest against fascism. Picasso created this painting in just over a month, and even today, experts are still debating what it all means. Detailed photographic documentation allowed us to trace how the composition evolved. Originally, the bull, the massive figure now central to everything, faced in the opposite direction. Picasso changed it himself during the painting's development. But why? Some think it's a direct reference to Spanish fascism and the brutality of the bombing. Others believe the bull carries something deeper, a hidden clue about the nature of violence itself, or the resilience of the Spanish people. Whatever the answer, this creature completely transforms how we read the painting. The decision might be yet another proof of Picasso's genius, the key that could change what we think we know about one of the most powerful anti-war paintings in history. How did Picasso create something with such devastating power? We need to look closely at the composition itself. When you first look at this painting, chaos reigns. A mother screams while holding her dead child. A horse writhes in agony, pierced by a spear. A dismembered soldier lies scattered across the bottom of the canvas. The way Picasso fragments these figures amplifies their suffering and creates an atmosphere of total devastation. The painting's done entirely in blacks, whites, and greys. It evokes the stark reality of newspaper photographs and removes any beauty or glory from the horror of war. Picasso reached an incredible level of emotional intensity at a time when modernist art was often criticized as too abstract, too detached from reality. The fragmented forms convey violence and disorientation. Your eye struggles to make sense of the overlapping bodies and distorted faces. This chaotic composition might represent the actual moment of the bombing, when order collapses into terror. The dramatic contrast of light and shadow reinforces this intensity. A single bare light bulb hangs from the ceiling like an evil eye, casting harsh illumination on the scene below. The sharp angles and jagged edges create a sense of shattered glass and splintered wood. The stark use of light and dark gives the painting such urgency and immediacy. Picasso emphasizes the horse's tortured position by placing it right at the center, allowing its agonized face to dominate your attention. Several details reveal that Picasso drew from multiple sources and traditions. The fallen warrior at the bottom clutches a broken sword, a motif borrowed from classical sculpture that represents defeated heroism. But near the warrior's hand, there's a small flower growing. Even amid all this destruction, there's a suggestion of hope or regeneration. The language of symbols here is incredibly complex. On the left, a bull stands massive and unmoved, its body turned towards us while its head looks back over the scene. To the right, a woman trapped in a burning building reaches toward the light, her arms extended in desperation. Above the horse, another figure leans through a window holding an oil lamp, perhaps representing truth or enlightenment, trying to illuminate the darkness. To truly understand how revolutionary this was, we need context. Before the 1930s, war paintings typically glorified battle or depicted heroic moments of triumph. Most war art came from official state commissions, more interested in projecting nationalist pride than showing the true cost of violence. But after World War I, something changed. Artists began showing war from the perspective of its victims, more honest and brutal, with a greater sense of humanity and suffering. One striking example of this new approach is Otto Dix's The Trench, painted around 1923. Dix's painting is full of grotesque detail and visceral horror. It takes advantage of a realistic style to force viewers to confront the physical reality of death in the trenches. Decaying bodies, mud-soaked desolation. But Picasso goes in a completely different direction. Guernica's fragmented forms are more abstract, and the symbolism is far more open to interpretation. Look at the screaming mother. Painted with extraordinary emotional power, you can see the anguish in her elongated face, the void of her mouth, the way her body curves protectively around her dead child. Compare Guernica to Diego Rivera's murals. Rivera employed a more direct, illustrative style with clear ideological messages. You can see exactly who the workers are, who the oppressors are. But Rivera's work lacks the ambiguity and psychological depth that Picasso uses to give his painting universal resonance. The symbolic language of Guernica introduces an entirely new level of complexity. This ambiguity creates layers of meaning that makes Rivera's work, by comparison, appear more straightforward and literal. There's little doubt that the work was inspired by the bombing of Guernica on April 26, 1937, an attack that killed hundreds of civilians and destroyed much of the town. But the real controversy comes down to the symbolism and meaning behind these fascinating figures that populate the canvas. Although the figures are distorted beyond recognition, according to experts, their presence is largely symbolic. Traditionally, the bull in Spanish culture symbolizes Spain itself, or sometimes brute force and darkness. In Picasso's own words, the bull often represented brutality and darkness in his work. Under this interpretation, Picasso may have intended the bull to represent Franco's forces or fascism more broadly. The fact it stands unmoved while chaos unfolds around it suggests a cold, unfeeling power that watches destruction without remorse. Some historians believe the bull represents the Spanish people themselves, resilient and enduring despite the violence inflicted upon them. In this view, the bull's steady presence becomes a symbol of survival rather than oppression. Another widely accepted theory is that the horse directly represents the innocent victims of the bombing. The horse, traditionally a noble creature, appears here in complete agony, its body pierced, its mouth open in a scream that mirrors the human figures around it. If this is true, the horse would be the emotional center of the painting, with its suffering standing in for all civilian casualties of modern war. This interpretation gives the work a more universal tone. It becomes a protest not just against one specific atrocity, but against the very nature of bombing civilian populations. Finally, some scholars argue that Picasso chose these symbols for purely personal or aesthetic reasons. He'd used bulls and horses throughout his career, particularly in his early works exploring Spanish culture and bullfighting. He saw in these animals archetypical forces, life and death, power and vulnerability, that aligned with his artistic exploration of human experience. In that sense, the bull and horse may not carry specific political messages. Instead, they serve as a part of Picasso's visual vocabulary, allowing him to express the horror of Guernica through forms he'd spent decades perfecting. This masterpiece proves once again the genius of Pablo Picasso, his unmatched ability to transform a specific historical tragedy into a universal statement about human suffering. This work, born from the chaos of war, continues to compel us to look deeper, reminding us that the true cost of conflict is not in politics, but in the suffering of the innocent. Thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. Please let me know in the comments what you think is the most powerful symbol in Guernica, and why. Don't forget to leave a like if you found this analysis interesting, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. See you soon. Bye.